On page 166, we learned our last lesson about Yatzeledesboy. That's considered, if something is heated to that temperature, it's considered the beginning of cooking, and that is when the prohibition takes place. If it's less than that, then it's not considered cooking, and therefore one could take something that is cold and put it next to a place of heat, as long as it's not directly on the heat. We gave an example last week of someone putting next to a fireplace. So if the food liquid is not going to reach Yatzeledes, the hand recoiling, so then that's considered warming and not heating, not cooking. So here we have, one should follow the strictest opinion. This is on page 166, the last sentence on the paragraph, at what temperature does the hand recoil, heat that cooks. One should follow the strictest opinion, which maintains that 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees, is the minimum temperature for which the hand to recoil. So I have here a chart that tells us different temperatures of different situations and what degree is it heated. So number one, I have a lukewarm bath for a young child. That's normally between 99 and 100 degrees. So that's not cooking. An average bath water is approximately 101 or 38.3 Celsius, also fine. A hot bath, only comfortable for some adults, that would be 104. So when we are speaking about that degree of heat that's considered cooking, it would be a very hot bath that only some adults would be comfortable in. Medium setting, when you open up your hot water, is 120 to 125. That is called cooking. According to the more lenient opinions, which is 110 degrees Fahrenheit. So here we have the hot temperature, the hot water of your sink in a medium setting is 120 to 125. A hot cup of coffee with some milk and sugar added is 125. A hot glass of tea that is almost too hot to sip is 165. A hot bowl of chicken soup, as soon as you take it out of the bowl, that is taken directly from the pot that was on the fire, is 180 degrees. So this is these are some of the temperatures that we're dealing with. Okay, so what I would like to do is maybe bring a thermometer. Do we have a hot water urn here in the premises? We have something. Do we have? You want a coffee here or tea? Is there a hot water available here? There's a hot water machine. Yeah. Okay, so maybe what we'll try to do is I'll try to get a thermometer, and we'll take we'll get some hot water from the hot water machine. Not today. I'll try to see for next time and see what we can put our finger in. We'll take the temperature and put our finger inside and see how hot it feels. That we should be able to know what it's like. But over here, it gives you a general idea that of what these temperatures mean. So according to what we've had in this book, number 3, a hot water comfortable for some adults is 104 to 105, which is 40 degrees Celsius, which we said is something that we should be concerned about. Maybe what we could do is also bring a raw egg and see if we take a raw egg and put it into a cup of water, will it make a change in the egg? Does it start to cook? it won't be a soft-boiled egg, it won't be a hard-boiled egg, but it will change like this. We have the egg yolk, the white is very clear. Then when it starts to get cloudy, that's when it's starting to cook. We'll see what happens. So I'll try to do that. Okay, so on page 166, we have the terms that are used. Kli Rishon, which is the first vessel. That is a pot that's on the fire. Even if it was taken off the fire, it's still considered Kli Rishon. It's still considered the first vessel that was heated directly by the fire, because even after you take the pot off the fire, the walls of the pot were heated up so sufficiently that so high, so it's going to keep that temperature for a longer time. It's not going to instantly start cooling down. So if you put something into this pot that was originally on the fire, even if it's off the fire, it's going to cook whatever you put inside. So that is Kli Rishon. Number one, the pot or the vessel that's on the fire. If we're speaking about the urn that's plugged into the wall, electricity, so the urn in which, so we consider electricity the same as fire, the same halachic status, and therefore that's going to be considered that is able to cook. That water is able to cook, and even if you pull the plug, even if it's something that's removed, so it's still considered Kli Rishon. The same thing is also if you have a hot water on the blech, you take it off, it's still considered Kli Rishon. Now, number two on page 167, pouring from the first vessel. Now, when you're pouring from that vessel, it's coming directly from the Kli Rishon. If you pour it onto a food which was not cooked, so it will cook the outer layer. And therefore, even cooking the outer layer is considered cooking on Shabbos. It doesn't have to be cooked through and through. So the pouring from a Kli Rishon is able to cook the outer layer. Now we come to number three, page 167, Kli Sheni, second vessel. That is the one removed from the source of heat that was on the fire. After pouring the contents of the pot into a second container that will still be hot enough that it causes the hand to recoil, that's considered a Kli Sheni. The only thing you could put inside are spices, which the sages said are considered halachic spices, oil, water, or other liquids. But uncooked food in the second vessel cannot be placed. So some say that certain foods that cook very easily in the second vessel will also be considered cooking. So here we have Kli Sheni, the second vessel, which is the first cup that you pour the water into. If we're speaking about pouring water, or if we're speaking about soup, the first plate in which the soup is being poured from the pot that was on the fire. Now, what about pouring from a second vessel? Now, so what happens with the second vessel is that the walls of the second vessel are going to start cooling down. The fact that you're pouring, so it is starting the cooling process. While it's still in the Kli Rishon, while it's still in the pot that was originally cooked, that's going to maintain the heat for a very long time. So it's going to stay a Kli Rishon for a very long time. So even if you close the fire and you have hot soup on the stovetop, you're still going to be serving a very hot soup. Am I correct? Yes? If you have a pot on the fire and you cooked up soup, close the fire, but the pot is still on the stovetop. When you would serve soup in it, from it, the soup is still going to be very hot. You don't have to keep the fire on to keep the soup hot. Even if you close the fire, the soup is going to stay hot. So that's the Kli Rishon, that even if it's on the fire or off the fire, the vessel in which the food was cooked is going to stay hot for a long time because the walls of the pot itself was heated up by the fire. And therefore, that's going to be a source of heat. When you pour it into a second vessel, it was not cooked in it. So it's going to start cooling down. Even in a cup, a paper cup. So it only stays hot for a certain amount of time. After that, it starts to cool down. And some people who like to have hot tea or coffee would go and fill it up again with more hot water because it became cool. Am I right? Even before you finish the cup, as you're drinking it, you say, well, I have to heat it up again because it's cooled down. Am I right? So why is that happening? It's because for two reasons. First of all, when the water is leaving the source of heat, it starts to cool off in the air. Secondly, the vessel itself, since the walls of the vessel were not heated up, so that itself is going to give it a chance to start the cooling down process. And we say that before you have a chance to cook something in it, even though originally it was hot, but it has to penetrate. Before it penetrates, the cooling process already made it so that it will not be able to cook. So that's why we have the kli sheni, the second vessel, still has very hot water because it's coming directly from the pot that was on the fire. So kli sheni, we do not, things that, only that which the Rabbanan said you could put in a kli sheni are permissible. But now kli shlishi, that's the second cup or the third vessel from the one that's on the fire. So that does not apply to the foods or drinks because it's already in the third vessel, it's already cooling down sufficiently. Now, in some circles, they say that you also go by how hot the water actually is. Some things cook very, very quickly. They don't need a very high degree of heat. So let's see, what are some of the things that,
You remember when I asked you about the tea?
Mhm.
The teapot,
Mhm.
like you bring the hot water,
Mhm.
and put this, the filter, or let's
everything
say
is
the bag of the
inside.
tea inside.
So that would be the same as a tea bag.
Yeah,
So we give it the same status. We'll have over here what to do with the tea bag. We'll come to that at that stage. So we'll try to read it from inside. So 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 generally speaking, the kli shlishi, we are lenient with the kli shlishi. There are others who are more strict with the kli shlishi. There's another with the second vessel, and they wait for the water to cool down sufficiently. uh, so the tea leaves are uncooked. Now, when you put when with hot water, they start to cook. The question is it just giving off? Is it actually cooking, or is it just giving off the color because of the heat, where you don't need a very high degree of heat
infusion.
to have that? So, in some circles, they will wait until the liquid cools down sufficiently. In others, they will say once it's kli shlishi, then we don't.
You mean that I pour the hot water from the heater? Or?
Yes, that's not that. So the heater is number one. The first cup is number two. The second cup is number three.
Oh, okay.
So that's kli shlishi is three removed from the first one originally. So it's 2 cups and three vessels.
Because we had like the heat water,
Yes.
then we put the tea inside and the hot water and we keep it on the table.
Mhm.
And then this is for the end of the,
Mhm.
so and then we pour for each cup.
Okay, but that would be from that would be the kli shlishi. Now, with at the bottom of page 167, with hot food, so we when we have the liquid, so we say as we're transferring from one vessel to the next, from one cup to the next, it keeps cooling down. What about a solid food? if you have hot potatoes, if you will transfer from one plate to another plate, the inside of the potatoes still stay hot. There's nothing to cool it down, unless it will stay long enough for it to cool down on its own from the air. But the vessel does not change the heat of the potato. Therefore, we say that transferring a hot solid food from one plate to the other does not change the status of the solid food. You have to wait until it actually cools down in order to add something that would be considered cooking. So, so let's see if they give any examples.
Has to be always three, shlishi?
Shlishi for liquids.
Has to always be three.
Yeah, that's what we, in order to avoid all, you have to start thinking this, yes, this, not, so we just give it a rule, shlishi, and that's it. Now, the same would be, let's say you have, when it comes, let's take some examples. Let's say you're speaking about a soup, hot chicken soup, and some people want to put in the soup nuggets. There's the soup mandlin, mini mandlin, and there's nuggets. The difference between the two is the little awesome croutons, those little ones. So they are deep fried. Deep fried is considered halachically cooking. So reheating them is permissible as long as you don't put them into the first vessel. So taking the hot soup from the pot, putting it into a plate, then this plate is a klisheni. Putting in the soup croutons that were deep fried, that's considered that was cooked. Reheating something that is dry is permissible. So then there is no concern about adding the croutons, those croutons, into your hot soup. As hot as the soup is, even if it will heat up very, very high, the croutons will heat up very, very high. So that's not a concern, that is permissible. The same will also be with lakshin or farfel that were cooked, and the lakshin are dry. Put your hand on it, it's not going to transfer the heat, the wetness, still dry. So those also, you're not restricted. You could put them into the hot soup. You could even put the lakshin into the plate and then pour from the ladle directly on the lakshin. That would also be permissible because the lakshin are pre-cooked, and reheating it again on Shabbos is permissible. So now you have noodles that were cooked before Shabbos, and they're completely dry, but they're cold. Now you want to serve soup. Normally, if you'll put the lakshin into a hot soup, what's going to happen to your soup? It's going to get cold. Yes? So now you want to have a hot soup with hot lakshin, hot noodles. So you are permitted to put the noodles into your plates that are completely dry and pre-cooked before Shabbos. You're going to take the ladle from the hot soup and pour it directly onto your noodles.
Oh, that you take away first.
You took it off the fire, yes. The hot soup is off the fire.
Half off.
And then you're going to, either you're taking it off and not putting it back. If you're not putting it back, you just put it down and serve it. That's it.
That's if you want to.
If you want to put it back, you're going to put it on an angle. You have two people holding it. In order your holding should be involved. But right now we're speaking. Let's say if you're not putting it back, so then you put the soup pot down, take your ladle, pour it directly onto your noodles. That is fine because the heating up something that was pre-cooked that is dry is permissible on Shabbos. Even if it's being poured from a klirishin, being poured from the first pot onto the noodles, that would be permissible. What cannot be done is if you are changing from cooked, you're cooking something that was prepared differently. So let's say if you do have matzah, you have challah, you have crackers, you have the soup nuggets that float on top. It used to be very popular. I don't see them anymore being sold. But they used to have like these, little round balls, and they're baked, puffy little
Oh, yeah,
puff.
yellow.
Not the ones that are croutons. Croutons are little square things, but these were big like this, and they are baked, and they float on top of your soup because but they're baked.
Hmm.
So changing from something that was baked and cooking it, that cannot be done on Shabbos.
Oh, so if I put the challah and then I put the.
No,
soup,
that cannot be done
Oh,
because we
because
take it
it's
from
not-
baked and making it into cooked. Cooked is with the liquid, baked was it was baked in the oven. So
No.
you cannot take from something that was baked and cook it.
Oh, really?
So that would be putting in crackers, putting in matzah, putting in challah. All of these things have to be done a kli shlishi. You could not take the ladle and put it on. You could not take your plate of kli sheni and just put the crackers in if it's still hot. You do transfer it to kli shlishi, the second bowl. Then you'll put the matzah and the challah and the crackers and the baked all the baked things. So
Oh, that's the same method.
so you have to have kli shlishi there.
1, 2, 3.
That's correct. So the pot is number one, the first plate is number two, second plate is number three.
So we're talking about the soup.
Yeah.
Which the last one has already the
That
challah and
you,
the.
that you could put in, yeah, that you could, yes. The same would also be some people when they have a hot coffee or a tea on Shabbos, they also like to soak. What do these people soak in it?
Tea biscuits.
Tea biscuits. Okay, so the same thing would also be in a kli shlishi. You would not do it with the first cup that we're going to be filling up from the hot water urn or hot water teapot. We're going to transfer it to a second cup, and then if we want to have the tea biscuits, we will do that in the kli shlishi. Now we come to another. So not everyone will put in the challah with the matzah with crackers and soup nuggets, but there is something else that are different opinions, and the Alter Rebbe it suggests that we be strict about it. And that is that we said that something that was pre-cooked and dry, so reheating it again on Shabbos is not a cooking issue. We spoke about the noodles that were pre-cooked before Shabbos. You touch them, they're dry. You can't transfer the wetness to another surface. So that's considered pre-cooked, dry, and we could not heat it up. There is no cooking issue. Now, what happens if the thing that you're heating up pre-cooked and dry, but then when you put it into a liquid, it dissolves. It melts. Can you give me an example? Something that's pre-cooked and dry, when you put it in a liquid, it melts.
Some crackers they just.
I want to speak about crackers now. No?
Oh, no.
Yeah, it dissolves. It becomes a part of the liquid. You don't see it
Like
anymore.
oats, for example.
Or sugar,
Sugar.
salt.
Yeah.
Those are pre-cooked. And we have the instant coffee, instant tea. They're all pre-cooked and dry. Now the question is, what is going to happen is when you put hot water on it, it's going to dissolve and it's going to become a liquid. So what do we look at this? What is the status does it have? Does it have the status of something that is dry and pre-cooked and therefore we're not concerned about heating it up again? Or the fact that it becomes a liquid, then we give it the status of a liquid. Whatever you could do with something that is wet, that's what you could do with these articles. So even with when it comes to noodles, the pasta, it stays the same. They don't disappear. Same thing is also going to be when we spoke about those little nuggets, those little croutons. They stay. You see them. what happens with our tea, instant tea, instant coffee, sugar, salt, they disappear, they become
Instant
liquid.
tea, what is instant?
Instant tea, the same thing, it's the same thing like coffee, you have it, you take it with a spoon, it's a
Never
powder.
seen that.
We have it, yes, in America, we have the
Oh,
instant tea,
I
it's
really
kind of the
never
same
had
thing, the same as instant coffee. You have the ones that you have to, the coffee beans that you actually have to cook, but when you have the instant, that it dissolves. So the same thing also be with instant coffee, cocoa, all of these. So these are now the question is, what rules apply to them? Does it apply to them like dry and cooked that you could, all the hot water that you put on them does not make a difference? Or do we say that since it's going to turn into a liquid, the same rules that we would do to something that is a liquid, same rules would apply to these? Let's take an example. Our example. You're served at the table hot soup, and you taste it. It's very hot. It's your cliche. You put it in the cliche. So you taste it. It's very, very hot. Hot. Now you see that it needs salt. Can you add salt, or do you have to wait until it cools down in order to, when you're able to, to eat it swiftly without having to wait for it? So it's not considered ready. We'll have to see Mitzvah next time to see how hot things are really when we're sipping it, to see if this is, what's the temperature that we spoke about, the 40 Celsius, or what does actually 40 Celsius feel like? When we the 104 Fahrenheit, when we put our finger in, or at least we'll have some idea what it is. I'm going to try to bring a thermometer for tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to, Mrs. Nimni is not going to be in tomorrow, so I'm going to take tomorrow's class. So we'll try to bring a thermometer and bring some hot water from the urn, and we're going to try to see everyone put their finger in, or maybe everyone will bring their own cup, and everyone will take a little sip to see what it works like. Or maybe we'll just go down there before the end of class, and we'll be able to take the thermometer down, and then we'll be able to sort of find out exactly what we're talking about. So I did give out a chart. I'll give you at the end of class, where we have some of the temperatures that we use throughout the day. You'll have some idea of what temperatures mean. So coming back again, could you add the salt or not? So if it's a kli shlishi, fine. So if you transferred it from the pot that's on the fire, that was on the fire, to a first plate, to a second plate, then the kli shlishi, we're going to say fine, because it's cooling down constantly. It's not going to cook it, and that's fine. So it matters how you were served. What happens if you were served in a kli sheni, and you want to add the salt, so you wait until it cools down some. It shouldn't be as hot as when we were. That's right. Now, what about the ladle?
What's the ladle?
Ladle is the spoon that you take the soup out with. A serving spoon. How do you get the soup into the first plate? How do you get soup? With a ladle. That's called a ladle. What's it called in
loop.
Okay.
Fresh.
Okay. So now our question is, does the ladle, is that considered a kli sheni? Or is that a kli rishon? Does it have, is the soup that the spoon that we're taking the soup out, where does that come in? Is that like the same as the soup that's in the first, in the pot? Or is that already kli sheni, and the first plate is a kli shlishi? So let's see what was the principle of why we said a kli sheni is the temperature has already been lowered. What was the reason for it? How did the kli sheni change the status of the heat?
By lowers
the temperature. Why? Because also the walls of the kli sheni are also involved in cooling down. First, the hot liquid has to heat up the walls of the kli sheni, so the temperature is going into is being cooled down by the walls of the Kli Sheni, and now whatever is going inside the Kli Sheni itself has also been cooler, because it's now gone through a process that the walls of the Kli Sheni are cooling it down. Now, what happens with the ladle? Question is, how hot is the ladle itself, the serving spoon? How hot does that get? Matters how long you leave it in the soup. If you put the serving spoon, the ladle into the soup itself, it's going to be just as hot as the soup itself.
Right.
And therefore, the walls of the spoon is not cooling anything down. It's just transferring. It just would be as if you're taking from the pot and pouring it into the Kli Sheni, or you're taking the spoon and pouring it into the Kli Sheni. As far as the heat is concerned, they're both the same, because you kept the spoon in the hot soup. So that in that case, the ladle will not be a Kli Sheni. It's the same as you're pouring from the pot into the plate. Instead of doing that, you're doing it with a spoon that has been heated up to the same as the soup itself. So when you leave the spoon inside the soup and the spoon gets as hot as the soup, then it's still going to be like pouring from the Kli Rishon, which does not make it into a Kli Sheni. Does not make it into second vessel. If you just scoop it out and didn't have a chance to heat up, then so we generally, you don't know how long you left it in the soup. You do it very quickly. Maybe it didn't get hot enough because you keep taking it out. So we consider that, yes, for the most part, we consider that as a Kli Rishon. We don't consider it. So the first plate would be Kli Sheni, then the second plate would be Kli Shlishi. Some people have a soup tureen. You know what a soup tureen is? A soup tureen is, some people don't like to serve the soup on the table. So if you want to serve the soup at the table, you won't take the pot and put it on the table. Will you?
No.
So what is there another way of doing it? So they have this big bowl, and it has a top to it. It's called a soup tureen. What you do in the kitchen is you bring this big bowl with a top. It's usually made out of ceramics, and you bring it into the kitchen. You empty the soup into the soup tureen, and then you will bring that to the table. That's a nice bowl, and you're going to be serving the soup from there. So that is going to be a Kli Sheni. And when you serve from there, whatever plate you're putting it into, soup tureen. Anyone see something of that sort? No one has ever served from a. Okay, so they used to sell it when you bought a set of plates. It used to come with a soup tureen as well. So when you have the eight servings or 12 servings, whatever it is, so the bigger sets, they used to come with this big soup serving bowl, and so that would be our Kli Sheni. Then whatever you serve from that would be a Kli Shlishi. So if you want to go buy yourself a soup tureen,
soup tureen. I don't see like soup.
So what does it say? Does it describe it? Does it say what it is?
Soup tureen, yeah, it's the one. It's the one that you put on the table.
You put on the table. Yeah. That's correct. So that is a cliche.
Fancy.
So that's a Kli Sheni, and therefore all the soup that you serve in it is a Kli Shlishi, and therefore you can add salt, you can add everything in there, and not be concerned because you've taken care of the Kli Sheni for everybody. In other circles, yeah.
The word
Kli, Tili, like we have it on page 160, 167, KLI. You have it's in the parentheses. We have Kli Rishon, Kli Sheni, Kli Shlishi. No, Rishon is Kli is a vessel. Rishon is number 1. Sheni is number 2, and Shlishi is number 3. So if you do have a Kli Sheni, so then you just wait until if you want to add something. So if you don't want to add anything to it, you eat it as hot as you wish. There's no rule that you have to wait until the soup cools down. If you're not adding anything to it, so then it's not an issue. If you are adding something that will dissolve, then we have the two opinions. In other circles, they will say that since originally it was cooked, originally it was dry, so that is what we go by. So actually, the Alter Rebbe, Shneur Zalman, in the Shulchan Aruch, he's more lenient. And then he has a list in the Siddur that he gives the additional later rulings that he felt it should be more strict. We have it in a number of different situations where he says that even though, halachically, there is a basis for the other opinions, but he suggests that you're strict. And that was what we spoke about at an earlier time, also with the Alter Rebbe changes. In the Shulchan Aruch, he's more lenient. In the Siddur, he's more strict. And that is when we said that something falls into your liquid, you want to take it out. So some people would just take a spoon with some liquid and take it out, and that would be fine. It's not considered that you are selecting because you're taking it together with the liquid, just like if you have a leaf that has an insect on it, so you don't throw out the whole leaf on Shabbos. What you could do is just tear off the piece that has the insect, discard that. The rest of it is good because you haven't taken it out of, you didn't select it because the good and the bad are still connected. Same thing in the Shulchan Aruch, it speaks about when you have something that fell into your liquid, fell into your tea, to your coffee, to your soup. So in Shulchan Aruch it says that you take a spoon, take some of the liquid with it, so it's still in mixture, and then get rid of that. The rest of it you would eat. But the Siddur he says not to do that because actually whatever you have inside becomes also bad. If you were to have, if you take a spoon, something that fell into your soup that you don't want, schach fell in. Shulchan Aruch speaks about a fly that fell in. So would you after you would in the weekdays, if you would take a spoon with some liquid, get rid of the thing, would you have the rest?
No.
See, with a lettuce leaf, if you were to wash the lettuce leaf and get rid of the insect, you would eat the rest of the leaf.
Yeah.
Because the leaf always has insects, and you always wash it off, and you always eat the rest of it. So it's actually, that itself is actually good, and the rest of it it's good and bad that's still mixed together. But when it comes to the liquid, something that was disgusting to you, you would not take it out in the weekdays and then drink the rest. It's because the whole thing becomes negative, and therefore the Alter Rebbe suggests that you pour it until the thing that you don't want pours out, and then you drink the rest. If it is something that let's say there's a seed that was floating around, so you just pour it off until it goes out. Instead of taking with the spoon out, just pour until it comes out. Let's say you had let's say there was some a lemon seed that's in your liquid, in your tea. It's floating on top. The lemon seed is fine. How do you get rid of the lemon seed? So you don't take a spoon and with some get out the lemon seed. What you do is you could pour until the lemon seed goes out, and then drink the rest. That's what the Alter Rebbe's conclusion is in the Siddur. So I'm just bringing that there's some things that the Siddur is more strict about, and that is also with a dry thing that dissolves, becomes a liquid. He considers that as a liquid. Whatever you would treat with something that is wet, that's the same way you treat this. So it would be klishlishi. In other circles, klisheni is fine for them. So I'm saying you go sometimes to a house, and they will you put everything, put the salt into klisheni, even though it's very hot. So there's a basis for it. In Halacha, there's an opinion that says that since originally it was cooked dry, so we look at it as it was originally, not as it becomes at the end. Alter Rebbe says, look at it as it is. Okay, so.
I have a quick question, nothing to do with that, but in Shabbos.
Okay, so let me say goodbye, and tomorrow I'm taking Mrs. Nimni's class, so we'll be learning Hilchos Shabbos continuation. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good morning. In some